In many of my videos, I've stated that I'm sex positive. Now, you might be wondering why I do that. Why is this guy who's helping porn addicts always talking about sex positivity? What exactly does that mean anyway, and why should I care? I mean, I'm trying to avoid porn. Isn't the messaging, well, a bit confused? I want to clear all that up, but I have to make a confession first. When I came into the recovery circles, I thought that pornography wasn't the problem, that I was. And there's still some truth to that statement, meaning that I'm the center of my own addiction and that all addictions start with the condition of the addict. I have had, however, a position change on pornography. I no longer treat it as an innocuous product that traps a segment of the population with problems. I've come to view pornography as being a bit more insidious, that its production, by and large, acts as a sexual surrogate in which consumption can change our perceptions about the nature of human sexuality. It can produce negative effects outside of the addiction, both social, physiological, and psychological. Dr. Gail Dines, professor of sociology and women's studies, stated the following in response to porn critical views. To assume that if you are against pornography, you're against sex, is to assume that anyone who criticizes McDonald's is anti-eating. Why can't they see that it's the same thing when it comes to pornography and sex? So let's revisit sex positivity. What is it? According to Wikipedia, the concept of sex positivity is generally attributed to William Reich. His hypothesis was that some societies view sexual expression as essentially good and healthy, while others have a generally negative view of sexuality and seek to repress and control libido. Let's also take a look at the definition posited by sexologist Carol Queen. She states, "Sex positive, a term that's coming into cultural awareness, isn't a hippy-dippy love child celebration. It's a simple yet radical affirmation that we grow our own passions on a different medium, that instead of having 2 or 3 or even half a dozen sexual orientations, we should be thinking in terms of millions. Sex positive respects each of our own unique sexual profiles, even as we acknowledge that some of us have been damaged by a culture that tries to eradicate sexual difference and possibility. It's the cultural philosophy that understands sexuality as a potentially positive force in one's life. And it can, of course, be contrasted with sex negativity, which sees sex as a problematic, disruptive, and dangerous. Sex positivity allows for and in fact celebrates sexual diversity, deferring desires and relationships and structures and individual choices based on consent. So, sex positivity is a way of embracing sexual diversity as healthy. It isn't, however, a shield that protects critical analysis from the vast swath of human sexual behavior. Rape is a human sexual activity that society actively represses. Rapists violate the agency of their victims and cause physical and emotional damage. Incest is another sexual activity in which it impacts the lives of future generations and causes harm to offspring. There are many sexual activities that don't escape criticism under the umbrella of sex positivity. When I first got into recovery, I was of the mindset that porn functioned in a very similar way that alcohol does for alcoholics, that you could substitute alcohol for porn and the stories would still work. The normal man walks into a bar and orders a beer, talks for a few minutes, and then goes home. The alcoholic walks into the bar and drinks until he can't walk anymore. This simple story stresses the relationship that alcohol has in the mind of the person consuming it, and certainly porn affects people differently from an addiction perspective. But does the porn escape criticism because a person engaging in it doesn't experience any bad or habitual sexual behaviors? Which is another way of saying, can porn cause problems outside of compulsive use? So let's flip back to sex positivity for a moment. A person can be both sex positive and still have a lot of things to say about pornography. I believe that part of the problem lies in people falsely equating critical analysis with negativity. Non-judgment is the mantra espoused by many who identify as sex positive, which is troubling because it ends up framing critical thought and discourages anything else as judgment and therefore negative. In the throes of my addiction, I couldn't make the distinction between sex and the tool. They were one, part of my own sexual routine. To attack porn was to attack my happiness. And even when I was in recovery, I still thought of porn as a widget that addicts couldn't manage, just like the alcoholic and his beer. The widget wasn't the source of the problem, or so I rationalized, and it shouldn't be the focus. While this is certainly true regarding the recovery process, porn is without a doubt something that deserves to be critiqued. Every human personality comes with its own defense mechanisms, which we use to avoid painful or inappropriate thoughts. Rationalization is a particularly insidious defense mechanism because it masquerades as a reason. Rationalization can take the form of misrepresenting the effects of a behavior, like saying, "It's just sex," or, stop me if you've heard this, "Other people use it too." But it can also blind us from the potential hazards of our own addiction. Porn isn't just about sex. As a category, it is an entertainment industry that uses sex to facilitate sexual gratification of its consumers. This industry, from large companies to small enterprising cam operators, are using a viewer's need for sexual fulfillment to provide sexual content in mixed media formats. And in that production, the morphing of sexual fantasy can become many things: exploitive, misogynistic, unattainable, the list goes on. Let's take a moment to talk about fallacious reasoning. It goes something like this. A porn critic says that all porn is demeaning, but doesn't consider specific acts where somebody else, like a private cam operator, does a sex act all by themselves. The power structure of a large company exploiting others is not present, and the sex act is a solo venture. So you might want to say that there's no external power structures involved, and the sex is not something you would consider to be exploitive in nature. In other words, it's somebody masturbating or somebody doing something what might be conceived rather vanilla. So the argument that the subject is being demeaned seems superfluous, right? That's called a generalization fallacy, where statements are made without any kind of analysis of all the parts. Again, there's good reason to reflect on the rationalization here. Is calling out a hasty generalization fallacy a defensive reflex? Or could there be other fallacies that a person like me would be engaging in if I did that? In a content analysis of best-selling porn films, researchers found that 88% of analyzed scenes contain physical aggression, generally spanking, gagging, choking, or slapping. So the medium as a whole seems to have a great deal of violence, despite the works of some fledgling cam operators. Perhaps rather than working on defending porn or actively working against it, it's best to instead use the critical eye on one's relationship to sexual entertainment. And this is the point where I tell you what you already know. Gratification from using porn is temporary and shallow. Once the high wears off, you eventually want more. The sex industry, all of it, is the drug pusher. When I was a younger man, I dated a stripper. I didn't date her because she was a stripper. I was friends with her before she became one. Because my ego needed to hear it, I'd ask her about how she handled flirting with other men every night. She answered that it was just a game to separate men from their money. It was the most honest and truthful thing I'd ever hear her say. And recently, in one of my 12-step rooms, a retired prostitute shared the exact same sentence with me. She shared how it made her feel empowered to use her body and hustle to separate men from their cash. The men meant absolutely nothing to her. Now, I tell you this so you get a broader scope of how sex is used as a way to hook you in and rob you of your time and resources. But it also robs both the person who is the sex user and the consumer of the sex of their humanity. People become nothing more than objects for exploitation. If you come from a computer background, sex can be thought of as a biological exploit that hackers seek. A person that has a strong control over their sex drive doesn't succumb. However, a person that is in the practice of letting go is prone to being used. Sex workers know this. Porn producers know this. Marketing executives know this. Sex sells because humans have a difficult time navigating the difference between fantasy and reality when the end result is gratification. The impact is that we are bombarded with sexual messages even when we aren't seeking them. Pornography is the tool working to find your sexual exploit. If you buy into the fantasy and become sexually gratified, the porn worked as intended. And you have just taught your brain that sexual gratification can happen through screens. Your brain has just given access to an industry that will do anything possible to keep you coming back. Similar to a casino in Vegas, they will keep going through the variety to make sure that you are constantly stimulated. Porn sites will keep pushing everything and anything in your face to keep you engaged in the content. You might feel like you have control, that you can just turn off the picture or movie and just walk away. And you may have just done that. But the system is rigged to keep you always engaged. If you walk away now, maybe they'll get you next time. And because you got a taste of the sexual gratification once, chances are you'll come back. This is the gaming mechanism. And also, my friends, this is the nature of the porn industry. It's built on getting you hooked. They make money on simulated sex and selling you your own arousal.